Hello, queers and allies, and welcome back to our queer positive podcast, Queerious Queers. I'm your host, Elle. I use any pronouns, and I'm joined today by Tevi.
Hi, I'm Tevi, and I've been using they, them pronouns.
QYAC is a part of YSB, the Youth Services Bureau, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting Ottawa's youth with factors impacting their physical and emotional well-being and development through a variety of services and interventions. The goal of this podcast is to give us the safe space to have some positive dialogue about our experiences as queer people, since we feel that a lot of queer coverage disproportionately focuses on very heavy queer issues. While it is important to discuss the discrimination that is faced by the 2S LGBTQ+ community, we want to create this space to celebrate queerness and share some of our positive experiences. Lastly, we wanted to thank our supporter, Youth Action Now, for funding this initiative. Today, we will be discussing aromantic and asexual identities. So the first question I have for you today, Tevi, is what does it mean to be aromantic or asexual?
Okay, so to start us off, I want to obviously say that I am asexual and aromantic. So put very simply, asexuality is when a person feels limited to no sexual attraction, and aromanticism is when a person feels limited to no romantic attraction. Obviously, both are spectrums and people may identify with them in different ways. There are also a number of microlabels under the ace and aro umbrellas that help explain different ace and aro experiences, such as being demiromantic or demisexual, which is when you only feel sexual or romantic attraction after forming a close emotional bond with someone.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. What is Aloe or allonormativity?
Okay, so someone who is allo is like either allosexual, alloromantic, or both. And it's basically just someone who doesn't identify as asexual or aromantic. And then when we're talking about allonormativity, it is very similar to heteronormativity in that it's kind of the belief that to live a happy, fulfilling life, you have to be in a traditional allo relationship, that everyone wants a traditional allo relationship, and that wanting one is kind of quote unquote normal, which, obviously isn't the case, and we're doing our best to fight against that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for explaining that. So, what are some signs from your childhood that give hints to your current identity?
Oh gosh, there were so many signs. I mean, I think a lot of ace and arospec people share the experience of like making up crushes and stuff, which I definitely did a lot as a kid. And not only that, but like to determine these crushes, I'd make like pros and con lists to sort of sort out whether someone would be like worth dating or whether I'd be able to tolerate it. Not like but like tolerate. And I distinctly remember, for example, like being in grade 5 when my best friend at the time had a crush on some guy. And like I logically pieced together that it would make sense if I had a crush on that guy's best friend because like we were best friends. I've since learned that allo people generally do not do this kind of thing. And it's more of like a feeling than anything else. Like, if Josh asks you out, they just follow their heart. Whereas I'm thinking like, is Josh good at math? If he is, maybe he could help me with math. But also he's kind of annoying. Does one outweigh the other? Do I hate looking at him? Like, I don't know how it took me this long to realize that something was up. Plus, to this day, I cannot like watch kissing on screen without really cringing and getting grossed out. So, that's something else that probably isn't very allo as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also able to be related to like, like people who experience attraction towards the opposite sex where like, like before you like you figure out your identity, you're like picking people to have crushes on in elementary school.
Definitely. Very queer
that's
experience.
So funny. Yeah. Very queer experience. I love it. So what do QPRs or queer platonic relationships mean?
So a QPR or queer platonic relationship, like you just said, is basically like a label for a type of relationship that is often used by aromantic people, aroace people, and some asexual people. Obviously, not all will use this term, but it generally refers to a relationship that is different in nature to a allo relationship. So falling outside of allonormativity and amatonormativity, which is basically like a more specific term for allonormativity in regards to romantic attraction. It can look different to different people, but basically describes a committed relationship that is formed without sexual or romantic attraction, often landing somewhere where it feels like it's more intimate than platonic, but not quite romantic. They may still include sexual or romantic acts depending on the people involved. So someone in a QPR, for example, may still go on dates with the other person or people in their QPR. As far as QPRs go, I think they're pretty cool personally. I find that where I lack in romantic attraction, I often make up in feeling like really emotionally close to my friends. So I think that, QPRs is a really helpful label to help define kind of that kind of attraction as an Aries person.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's important in having a QPR relationship with someone who is Aro or Ace?
So I feel like anytime, this is another like Airways thing where anytime anyone asks me for advice on the relationship, because I can't really see it in the same way that they do, it all comes back to communication, right? Like you have to have good communication with someone who you are that close with, and like seeing that often and talking to and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So especially when you're Air and Ace, all kinds of like Air and Ace people are very different, obviously, and have different comfort levels and what they like or dislike. Like we mentioned earlier, some Airways people, like aromantic people or asexual people, may still be comfortable engaging in certain like sexual or romantic acts that are, traditionally seen as that. And then some of them aren't. So, it's really important to kind of have, I guess, more serious talks with someone who you are, in a QPR with, who is Aro or Ace, especially if you're Aloe, on kind of their different boundaries, what they're comfy with, what they're not comfy with, and what the relationship is actually going to look like. Because I know personally there are a lot of things in traditional relationships that have made me really uncomfortable in the past. So it's good to talk about that and kind of clear that up so that everyone is as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Communication is key. So what's your favorite Aro or Ace representation in the media, and what do you love about them?
Oh man. Okay, so I wish there were more, obviously, but I have like two that really stick out in my mind, and one is a character and one is a public figure. So the first one is Todd from BoJack Horseman. Oh my gosh. So the entire show is really amazing, and I really recommend it. But especially when it comes to him, I still can't watch any of his Ace scenes without just kind of like tearing up a bit, because I'm a bit of a sap like that. He was the first Ace representation I ever saw, and the show ended up handling it really well, kind of balancing him, figuring out his sexuality and coming to terms with it, with him as a character overall, and still having different arcs and stories and stuff like that. So really, really amazing how they handled it. I would definitely recommend giving it a watch.
I haven't seen it yet, but now I want to.
Oh yeah, definitely watch it. It is an amazing show. I will not stop raving about it. This is not sponsored. Yeah,
maybe it should be.
I mean, hit me up. As for public figures and a second like example, definitely for me it would be Jaden Animations. She actually came out as Aro Ace pretty recently, a couple months ago, I think. And as someone who's actually been watching her since I was a kid, it was really cool to see her talk about an identity that we share that really isn't talked about that much. Definitely teared up a bit during her coming out video too. It just articulated so many of the things I felt since I was a kid. And I definitely recommend giving it a watch if you haven't already, especially if kind of the idea being Airways, either, maybe you're questioning, or maybe you're kind of confused about how it works or what it feels like and that kind of thing. So really, really good video. And I'm really happy to have that representation now.
So what's the best thing about being Aro or Ace?
Oh man, I mean, for me, it's just never really having to deal with things like crushes, I guess. Like, I don't know how. Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know how true they are, but I read a lot. I've read so many books that have just described having a crush as like stressful and like nausea-inducing and generally really unpleasant and scary. So, I can't say I'm too upset with being able to avoid that kind of thing. Also, the whole like never having the stress of like romantic rejection or anything like that, because I'm likely never going to be in a situation where I'm asking someone out. So that's kind of like really nice. Just there are already a lot of stresses in life. I don't need that, and I'm happy I don't have that to deal with.
Yeah. So what are some things that you don't understand about people who are Aloe?
Oh man, Aloe people are confusing. Like even though I know the difference between like different attraction and stuff like that, I'm still really stuck on what that actually feels like when it comes to romantic or sexual attraction. Like, you're telling me you just look at a person or like, like I want that, like in an attraction way. I've never really understood celebrity or fictional crushes either. Like, it's fascinating to me to hear about that kind of thing, because I just can't imagine what it feels like. I don't know. It sounds fake to me, which is, I guess, why I am Aro Ace.
So what is your favorite most true, least true, or just overall best Ace or Aro stereotype?
Oh man. Okay, so there's so many different like symbols and stereotypes that go with being Aro or Ace. Like, I love the stereotype of like an asexual would always choose like cake over sex, because the option is, or the answer is very, very clear.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, no, exactly. The playing card, like the Ace of Spades or whatever, is more of a symbol than anything else, but I like that too. I think it's very cool. I like the like dragon stereotype, just the whole idea of like asexuals or aromantics choosing like anything that they can over sex or romance is like very funny to me, and also like very true, obviously. And then when it comes to like a bad stereotype that you often see, it's kind of the whole thing that like people who identify as ace or aro are too young because, quote unquote, attraction doesn't show up that early, which is like kind of the same argument you see when it comes to other queer identities. So we kind of have that in common. But like I first started identifying as ace and aro when I was around like 14. And I kind of just had that mentality where I was kind of constantly trying to reassure myself that, oh, I'm probably just a late bloomer. And I was just kind of waiting around for the attraction to hit me one day. And I'm nearly 18 now and nothing's changed, and still sometimes because of like how much you see that stereotypes, I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's gonna hit me, like one day it's gonna hit me. And like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter either way, because, well, yes, like labels can change and you may end up feeling sexual or romantic attraction after you've identified as aro or ace. They won't always change, and that's all right. Bottom line being that it's okay to identify as whatever you're feeling in the moment, with the exception that things may change and they may not, and either is okay.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. Yeah, so that's all the questions that we have for Tevi today, but we have a couple of submissions from listeners about their own experiences in being aro and ace. And hopefully we'll have you react to some of them and give your own thoughts.
Yeah, I love hearing about other people's experiences. It's really nice.
Mm-hmm. So the first question we asked was one that we asked you previously, and that was, what are some signs from your childhood that gave hints to your current identity? And our first submission is maybe not childhood signs exactly. I don't think I was really the kid that showed a lot of signs of queerness when I was young, but a few little memories here and there do stick out, at least to me. When I was about 12 or 13, I was at summer camp with some friends. The topic of conversation veered towards the people, boys specifically, because I was at the stage in my life being assumed cis and straight in our class, and who was the most attractive or good looking. I honestly was completely baffled by the way my friends were talking about people and their attractiveness, and just trying to figure out why we were having that conversation in the first place. I ended up sort of picking one at random because my friends were demanding I give an answer. So I uncomfortably just went, this person, I guess.
Oh man. yeah, that's a lot about, the ace experience for sure. Again, we have the whole like picking crushes thing. I feel the same way, where like even now, like listening to people rave on about who they find attractive is like really confusing to me, and like I have trouble picking out like what actually is attractive or not, because the whole stereotype where like you'll have generally a straight girl who shows like a picture of a guy and is like, oh my god, like this is a bad picture of him, but whatever, like and like people find them really attractive. It's like that for me, where like we have the feeling of like, oh well, I don't understand the attraction, whatever. It's like that for me, but like for everybody. So I definitely like get that in terms of like trying to pick out who's attractive and just like really not knowing how to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Then when it comes to like sex ed, oh man, I was the kid at the back of the class. I was just laughing because I thought it was like so funny. I was like, no way people actually do these things. Like, this is a joke, right? Turns out it is not a joke. Also hard for me to believe about the whole, people like in high school feeling that way. Like, I still feel like people are waiting. And there comes the point where it's like, I'm going to be like 30, 40 and still being like, yeah, no, I don't think anyone feels like that attraction. Yeah, eventually you realize it's just you.
Yeah, so our next story is under the same prompt of what are some signs from your childhood that gave hints to your current identity? And the answer is, I thought crushes meant just wanting to be really good friends with somebody, and I could never find a label like bi or pan that fit my sexuality because I viewed everybody equally, but also nobody at the same time. Like, I felt the same for everyone, but the feeling was absolutely nothing.
I think this is another like, very common experience, especially when you're like aroways. I definitely went through the same thing. So like for a lot of my younger years, I was obviously questioning, oh yeah, maybe I'm ace, maybe I'm aro, but at the same time, like, no, I'm probably just like bi or pan. And I actually used those labels for like quite a long time, just kind of in the background as I was questioning, because the whole idea of like zero attraction equals zero attraction, you know, like I am equally unattracted to like guys, girls, and anyone else, so I must be like pan. And I think that's a very common thing that lots of people go through, because they don't realize that that equal attraction is just like no attraction. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so our last submission under this prompt is not really childhood, but I guess I never wanted to have sex with someone, and I never had many crushes. Other people would find others cute, and I just wouldn't understand, but maybe that's because I grew up around straight people.
Yeah, definitely another very relatable experience. Just kind of oh, like for example, you know, the whole thing where people are like you know, oh, that person's so hot or whatever, or like that person's so sexy. For the longest time, like I had no idea what that meant or any connotations. I don't know how true it is, but I've seen like other ace or aro people freaking out on the internet being like, oh, well, they say it's hot because seeing them makes them feel like attracted to them, that makes them like hot or whatever like that. And like I mean, obviously I have no way to confirm whether that's true or not, but like, oh my God, if so, like, it's just so hard to understand because you never really feel it that way, you know? If I'm thinking someone's attractive, it's probably just going, oh yeah, I like their like hair, I like their clothes, not like I think that they are hot and like whatever else, you know?
I would answer you, but I'm like honestly questioning my sexuality and I have no idea what's going on. I'm just here to vibe under the label of queer.
No, that's totally cool. Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing your stories. So our second prompt is one that we asked Tevi again earlier. What do you think the number one thing people misunderstand the most about the aro ace spectrum is? And our first submission says, either everyone who is aro is also ace and vice versa, or aro ace people just don't feel love at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big misconception. You know, the whole idea of like, you know, split attraction and kind of feeling it in different ways, where you can be both like, you know, asexual and like a lesbian, or aromantic and like pansexual, where it's kind of not limited to that. So I think a lot of people assume that like, you know, one goes with the other. And of course there are like, you know, aro-ace people, but it's also important to acknowledge like the other aspects of the community as well. And so with the whole idea of like aro-ace people don't feel love at all and like that kind of stereotype, now obviously there are like some loveless aro-ace people that like, you know, may feel things in different ways or whatever, and that's totally valid and stuff. But a lot of aro-ace people also feel like different kinds of love, you know, so they may not feel like romantic or sexual love or like anything like that. But they may feel something like platonic love, or, you know, altruist love or emotional love and things like that instead. So like lots of aro-ace people will still like feel the capacity to love their friends and their families and, you know, lots of things like that. And it's just kind of like a different kind of love. And it doesn't mean that it's not there, even though it's not like romantic or, you know, traditional in the sense of what you often see love to be. So definitely very harmful misconception. But, you know, there are lots of ways to love, and there's no one right way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So our next response is again under the same prompt. And that it's not something you choose. Just like any other queer identity, there's sometimes this assumption from cis-het Aloe people that your identity is a temporary phase and or something you choose to have. Just no, I didn't choose to be asexual anymore, that I chose to have hazel eyes, and it's not something that I'll grow out of. If how I identify or label myself changes in the future, that's a journey I'll have gone on to figure out. It's not a random choice or whim. Accept people's identities for what they are. Stop asking invasive questions, please, cis-hets.
Oh my God, honestly, this, like, if I have to hear another, like, Aloe cis-het person tell me, it's like, oh, well, you just haven't met the right person one day. Or, like, how do you know if you've never tried it, you know? Like, it's, you know, people know their identities, and it's not really your business to say, like, what they do or don't feel when it comes to those identities. So, for sure, very, like, annoying kind of misconception, and very much one that, like, isn't true and stuff. You know, we hear the whole like, oh, it's just a phase, like a lot in the queer community as a whole, and you know, obviously it's not, so you know.
Yeah, for sure. So again, another app submission under this prompt. I think people know nothing about being asexual because I always have to explain what it means. Not gonna lie, it's awkward because I need to go into depth about romantic versus sexual attraction, which I haven't fully acclimatized myself to. It feels really outing in a sense, and I don't blame them for not knowing. Asexuality is not taught anywhere, and the only reason I learned about it was thanks to one of my other friends. People often tend to confuse aro and ace people, or think that if you're ace, you're automatically aro, as we stated earlier. And it's not the same, but I really can't blame them since it's not one of their better known sexualities. At this point, it's easier to identify as queer because you don't have to go into little details like that, and I don't always want to explain that I feel no sexual attraction, but I'm panromantic.
Yeah, no, I definitely emphasize that that's a lot. It's really annoying to explain, and it sucks that there isn't like as much representation as there should be. Fingers crossed will be more soon, but yeah, I definitely emphasize with the feeling of like feeling like it would be easier to identify as queer than whatever you might actually identify as, just because people might not know what it is, and it is really tiring to explain that. So for sure, that's something that kind of sucks about you know, identifying with a lesser known identity and just having people be stupid and not know much about it. So I'm sorry that you have to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you. And our final response under this prompt, what do you think the number one thing people misunderstand the most about the aro ace spectrum is that we can engage in sex and romance. We just don't inherently feel attraction based off of sex and romance. In addition, some aro ace people do not feel attraction based off of sex and romance, just not the same as aloes.
Yeah, for sure. I think we talked about that earlier too, where it's like everyone has different boundaries and stuff, and often it can be really annoying if people kind of just assume stuff about you without actually like getting to know you first after knowing that you're aro or ace. So, you know, it is a huge spectrum, and everyone has different comfort levels. And that's something that, especially for aloe people, is like really important to know and keep in mind while interacting with like ace and aro people.
Yeah, for sure. Our next prompt is, what is the best thing about being ace or aro? And our first response is, personally, because I know some ace people do have intercourse, but not having to worry about pregnancy.
Oh yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, like you said, there are some exceptions. But yeah, big stress out of the way. Very nice.
Yeah. And our next response is, romantic and sexual attraction seems stressful, like you said earlier. Like, why is it normal for your partner to be seen as another level above your best friend or other relationships, and that they always take priority? Like, why can't they just be super best friends? Why is there so much pressure to be in one? Why do people cheat on each other? Why is marriage such a normalized thing, and getting divorced could mean losing so much? I like not having to deal with any of that.
No, literally, like there is so much pressure that comes with like romantic attraction and stuff like that, and aloe relationships in general. Like the whole getting married thing, like, oh my God. Like you're talking to us asking if we haven't met the right person, but it seems so stressful to be like, oh, I have met the right person. Like I'm happy to not have to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so our next prompt is what are some things that you can't understand about people who are aloe? And our first response is sexual attraction in general. I've never felt it towards anyone, and the idea of sex is extremely unappealing to me. Like, you want me to take off my clothes and do that with someone and enjoy it? No thanks. I know what sex is, but I don't really understand at all why people like it.
Yeah. Yeah, that adds up. Personally, like lots of those things, just like I mean, I talked earlier about like the kissing thing on screen where like I find it really hard to watch that because it's just, it doesn't seem appealing to me at all. I don't understand why people like any of that stuff.
For sure. And our last prompt is again that one that Tevi answered earlier. What is your favorite most true, least true, or least true ace or aro stereotype? And our first answer is, I'd say my least favorite is the fact that ace people are emotionless.
Yeah, that's a bad one. No, you see a lot like in TV and stuff where like if there are canonically aro ace or aro or ace characters, you know, a lot of the time they are played by like, oh yeah, it's this robot. It's this
Yeah.
like inhuman being that just like, you know, it's not good obviously because, you know, we talked earlier about like different kinds of, you know, love and things like that. And, you know, areas people, even if they don't feel attraction, they still have feelings, right? Like
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's definitely a harmful stereotype portraying them as like these emotionless machines a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and our next answer to that question is that garlic bread is better than sex, and most ace people think that.
You know what, that is true. Again, we talked about like cake and stuff. Garlic bread definitely top tier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good answers.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to responding to all of those answers, and our audience, thank you so much to answering all of our prompts that we put up on our stories.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We love the interaction, you know.
And finally, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Queerious Queers. If you liked today's topic and want to learn more about it, we've included a resource in the description. Catch us on social media to see the type of educational content we create and the events that we host. Go to our page on Instagram or Facebook. Our username is QYAC.YSB. That's QWAC.YSB. Check the link in our description for our email as well. We are holding a very exciting giveaway. To enter it, please see our corresponding Instagram post, and we will be contacting you through our social media to get more info. One final shout out to Youth Action Now for supporting us in this endeavor and amplifying our voices. See you next time on Queerious Queers, and thank you so much for listening.